She didn't notice it at first. The office lights flickered overhead like always, that cheap buzzing kind that makes your head feel heavy after an hour. Her heels tapped softly on the laminate flooring as she passed the front desk, giving a little wave to no one, out of habit. Her smile was real, too real. She had no idea her entire world was about to split down the middle. The envelope was already there, resting perfectly parallel to the edge of her keyboard. No markings, no stamp, just her name, Renee, typed in a font she didn't recognize. It shouldn't have been there. She looked around, confused, but the place was quiet. Her team wasn't due in for another 20 minutes. The hallway behind her was empty. She reached for it slowly, like it might explode, and felt the slight texture of thick paper under her fingertips. She opened it. One photo. That's all. Just one glossy photo, 6x4. It was blurry, like it had been taken quickly, maybe from a phone. But the image was clear enough to make her blood stop cold. She was in the picture. So was he. And they were kissing. But here's the thing. I took that photo, and I made sure she found it before I ever said a word. I watched her from across the street, sitting in my car with the engine off, fingers locked together so tightly my knuckles had gone white. Her reaction wasn't what I expected. No dramatic gasp, no dropping the photo like it burned her. No. She just stood there, staring at it like her brain refused to process what her eyes were screaming. Good. Let it sink in. For 3 months, I'd been living with a ghost. Not the kind that rattles chains, but the kind that slips into your bed smelling like someone else's cologne. The kind that smiles at you through dinner while texting her coworker under the table. The kind that tells you she's just tired when you reach for her, only to find her half-naked selfies in the iCloud trash folder. So yeah, I was done playing stupid. The photo wasn't even the worst one I had, just the most subtle. I chose it carefully. Not the ones of them in his car. Not the ones from the hotel lobby. Just that one simple frame. Her in his arms, their mouths pressed together behind the tinted glass of a conference room. She thought no one saw them, but I saw everything. She didn't move for almost 2 full minutes. Just stared. And then, as if her bones finally thawed, she carefully folded the envelope shut and slid it into her drawer. Her face was pale, lips tight, jaw clenched like she'd just swallowed glass. Then she sat down, opened her laptop, and pretended like nothing had happened. That's when I knew. She wasn't going to confess. She wasn't going to call me in a panic, sobbing into the phone, asking how I knew or begging for forgiveness. She was going to bury it. Just like she buried her vows, our plans, the weekend trips she canceled because of deadlines. This wasn't guilt. This was calculation. I had no plan when I took that photo. No plan when I slipped it into her office at 5:34 a.m. using the spare key card I borrowed from her gym bag. No plan when I sat in the car, watching. But now I had direction. She was going to lie to me again. That night. She was going to walk into our house, act like nothing happened, maybe kiss me on the cheek and talk about her day like she didn't know I was watching her entire life unravel. So I decided to give her a second envelope. But the next one, that one wouldn't be just a photo. That one would burn. I didn't sleep that night. I lay there, in our bed, beside her. Her back to me, as usual, like I was just the wall she faced before drifting off. She was breathing slow and steady, but I could tell she wasn't asleep. She never fell asleep that fast unless she was drunk or trying to avoid something. And this time, it was the latter. She didn't mention the envelope. Not once. Not a single word about anything strange at the office. When I asked her how her day was, she smiled, fake as a mannequin, and said it was just the usual Monday madness. I watched her lie to my face like it was nothing. And somehow, that cut deeper than the betrayal itself. I spent the early hours on the living room floor with my laptop open and 2 folders in front of me. One labeled insurance, the other her. The her folder was thicker now. Screenshots, printed texts, transcripts from the stupid voice memos she thought she deleted. I had copies of everything. I had voice recordings. I had timestamps. I even had a GPS log from an app she didn't know was still running on her old phone that tracked her business trips to a cheap extended stay motel on Route 12. But this wasn't about revenge. Not yet. This was about control. I crafted the second envelope carefully. No photos this time, just a single USB stick. Inside it, an audio file. 14 minutes and 42 seconds of crystal clear audio. Her voice. His voice. Moaning. Laughing. Whispering. making plans for a weekend away while I was home recovering from a dental surgery. There was one part where she joked about how I'd never know a thing, and he said, "He's harmless. You got him wrapped." That part hit differently. I drove back to her office at 5:12 a.m., parked around the corner, and waited for the maintenance guy to roll up. I knew his schedule. Tuesdays were his early shift day, and he always propped the back door open while hauling in supply crates. He nodded at me like I was just another sleepy husband dropping off lunch. This time, I placed the envelope in someone else's office, the office of her boss, Denise. Inside, I left no explanation, no signature, just the USB and a post-it. You should know what happens after hours in your conference room. I didn't want Denise to fire her. I wanted Denise to watch her, to make Renee sweat, to wonder when the trap would spring, when the other shoe would drop, who knew what. Because nothing kills a cheater faster than paranoia, and Renee was about to choke on it. That night, at dinner, she barely touched her food. I asked her what was wrong. She said she had a stress headache. She was quieter than usual, checked her phone obsessively. When it buzzed during dessert, she actually flinched. I watched her read the message, lock her screen without replying, and get up to wash a plate that was already clean. That's when I knew Denise had opened the envelope. Renee didn't know what was coming next. And honestly, neither did I. But I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. Because the third envelope, the third one wouldn't just destroy her job. It would reach our home. And it would take something she loved more than me. She always said her job was just a job, a paycheck, a title, a thing to do between sunrises. But that was a lie. Renee lived for the power it gave her. The attention, the authority, the way people looked at her during boardroom meetings like she was the smartest voice in the room. I used to be proud of that. Used to brag about how my wife had worked her way up from assistant to regional ops lead in 5 years. But now I saw it for what it was, the stage she built for herself to perform on. And I was just the guy clapping in the audience, stupidly loyal and stupidly blind. She didn't love me anymore. That much was clear. But she still loved something. Her reputation. Her image. And, more than anything, she loved being the kind of woman who could walk into a room and have people stop talking just to hear what she thought. So, for the third envelope, I took that from her. It started with an email. Not from my personal account, obviously. I'd spent weeks building a fake identity. Dan Carter, freelance HR compliance consultant. The email came from a domain I paid for, hosted through an encrypted relay, impossible to trace back to me. I sent it to her company's internal ethics department. Subject line, anonymous report, policy violations involving leadership staff. Inside the email was a link, password protected, to a folder filled with documentation. Photos, transcripts, video stills pulled from security footage I'd obtained through a friend who worked in property management. I'd redacted faces, blurred IDs. It wasn't about revealing everything. It was about raising questions. And questions started flying almost immediately. Renee came home 2 hours earlier than usual that day, claiming the entire office had been evacuated for a surprise compliance audit. A lie. The truth was, her world was cracking, and I saw it in the way she kicked off her shoes without bothering to line them up like she usually did. Her blazer was wrinkled. Her phone had 19 unread messages, all from unknown numbers. She sat on the couch and stared at the blank TV screen for 10 minutes before saying a word. Then, finally, "Glenn, have you noticed anyone acting weird toward you lately?" My stomach nearly dropped, but I kept my face still. "Weird how?" I asked. "I don't know. Just like someone's watching you. Or maybe following us." Her eyes were scanning mine like she wanted me to admit something, but she didn't even know what. That was the magic of what I'd done. She couldn't point to anything, couldn't accuse me of anything, because she didn't know how deep the hole went. Later that night, I watched her pacing our bedroom. She didn't think I saw her slip her work phone into a drawer and grab her old iPad. She was probably trying to check her alternate accounts, her backup communications, the dirty little pockets of her life where I was never meant to look. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered the voicemail. The one I found buried in her deleted folder. The one where she laughed about me being soft. About how she sometimes wished I'd find out. Just so I can see how fast he'd fold. I didn't fold. I became something else entirely. And now, for the first time, I saw it in her eyes. Fear. But she still hadn't admitted anything. Not to me. Not to herself. She was still clinging to the idea that she could fix it all, manage the crisis, control the damage. She had no idea the fourth envelope was already being delivered. And this one wasn't going to her. It was going to someone who would never look at her the same again. The fourth envelope didn't arrive at her office. It wasn't slipped under her keyboard or left in the company mailbox like the others. This one showed up at a quiet little brick house in West Linford. The kind of place with wind chimes on the porch and a fading home is where the heart is plaqued next to the front door. Her mother's house. I didn't do it out of spite. I didn't even do it out of strategy at first. But the idea came to me one night as I sat scrolling through Renee's private Pinterest boards. She had one titled Tea with Mom, full of floral centerpieces, lavender scone recipes, and soft conversation prompts for reconnecting. That board broke me in a way I wasn't ready for. She was still pretending to be someone gentle and honest and close to her roots. A daughter worth admiring. She still wanted her mother to believe she was the woman who baked on Sundays and sent birthday cards a week early. So I shattered that image. Inside the envelope was a single letter. Handwritten. Not in my handwriting, but hers. Copied and mimicked after dozens of samples I'd found in old journals. A full confession, dated 2 weeks prior, detailing everything. The affair. The hotel. The gifts. The plans to eventually leave me when the timing felt right. I used her voice. Her tone. Her casual dishonesty. It wasn't forged with rage, it was crafted with precision. And when her mother called the house crying, asking, "Renee, what is this?" I knew it had worked. I was in the kitchen, pretending to read when I heard the conversation unfold. Renee sounded like someone whose lungs had just been pulled out. "Mom, I don't, what are you talking about?" There was a pause, then a shout. "Don't lie to me." "Not me, Renee. I know your handwriting. I know when you're not being honest. You didn't even have the courage to tell me yourself?" Renee was shaking. Her hand clenched so tight around her phone, I thought it would snap in half. She walked out of the kitchen mid-call, locking herself in the bathroom. I could still hear her voice through the door, broken, scrambling, defensive. "Mom, it's not what you think. Someone's messing with me. I swear, I didn't write that." But her mother had already hung up. Renee didn't come out of the bathroom for almost an hour. When she did, she was pale and quiet, her face blotchy from crying. She looked at me like she wanted to say something, like she needed something from me, but the words never came. She just stood there for a second, then walked past me and went to bed, still in her work clothes. The next morning, she didn't go to work. First time in 6 years. She told them she was sick, but I knew better. She spent the whole day on the phone, not with me, not with her mother, with lawyers, with IT people, with someone named Jeremy, who she whispered to while pacing the hallway. She was unraveling, fast. That night, she sat across from me at dinner and finally asked, "Glenn, is there anything you want to tell me?" I looked at her for a long moment, then shook my head slowly. "No. Should there be?" She didn't answer, but her eyes searched mine like she was drowning, hoping I'd toss her a rope. I didn't, because the truth was, I'd already mailed the fifth envelope. And that one, it was going to a stranger. But not just any stranger, someone whose name she'd spoken only once in her sleep. It was 3:17 a.m. when she said his name. I wasn't asleep. I hadn't really slept in weeks. But she was out cold, one hand curled under the pillow, the other loosely holding her phone like it was a comfort object. She mumbled softly at first, indistinct words, breathy nonsense. But then, suddenly, clear as a bell. "Callan, no, we can't." I sat up in bed like I'd been hit with ice water. Callan. I didn't know the name. Not from her contact list. Not from her inbox. I'd combed through every account, every folder, every file, and not once had I seen it. And yet she whispered it like it was familiar, intimate, like it belonged to a piece of her that she hadn't given to anyone else, including the man she was cheating with. And the way she said it, it didn't sound like guilt. It sounded like regret. The next morning, I began the hunt. I searched through everything, LinkedIn, Slack logs, old email threads, even her Venmo history. Nothing. But then, buried in a backup archive from her 5-year-old Gmail account, I found a thread. Subject line, "Catch up." The exchange was short and harmless on the surface. A message from a man named Callan Royce. No last name on her reply, just, "Nice to hear from you. Not sure if I should respond, but here I am." That was it. That was all she'd left behind. But that was enough. I dug deeper. I found his full name, his address, his business. He was a writer. Freelance. Quiet online, but still traceable. He lived one town over, in a converted loft above a coffee shop that closed at 6 p.m. every day. He had no idea who I was. No idea who she'd become. And according to the timestamps, they hadn't spoken in at least 8 months, which made him perfect. The fifth envelope didn't contain a photo, or a letter, or audio. It contained a flash drive. On it, a single file, a screen recording. A folder named Renee_2025 being opened. Inside, documents, hotel receipts, screenshots, message logs, all named with dates and first names only. All anonymous enough to protect me, but damning enough to raise every red flag in Callan's soul. I mailed it to him with no return address. 2 days passed before anything happened. Renee was still off work, still sick, though I noticed she'd cleaned out her laptop bag and reset her phone to factory settings. Desperation was setting in. She was trying to erase things she thought might haunt her. But ghosts don't live in devices. They live in people. On the 3rd day, she got the call. I watched her answer it on the front porch, where she thought I couldn't hear. She said hello. Then there was a pause. A long one. And then I watched her sit down slowly on the bench, mouth parted, eyes wide. Whatever he was saying, it broke something in her. Her face twisted, then collapsed. I saw her hand cover her mouth as if trying to stop a scream from escaping. She didn't say much. Just why now? And how did you find me? But I already knew the answer. Because he hadn't found her. I sent her to him. When she came back inside, her face was blank. Pale. She didn't look at me as she walked past, into the kitchen, then down the hall. The bedroom door clicked shut. She stayed in there for hours. Didn't cry. Didn't speak. Just silence. That night, she didn't eat. Didn't answer when I asked if she was okay. Didn't move when I reached for her shoulder under the covers. She flinched like I was fire. But that was nothing compared to what was coming. Because now that she had Callan back in her mind, now that the past was breathing down her neck, I was going to show her the one thing she'd never expect. The 6th envelope, it wouldn't be about her. It would be about me. Everyone assumes the betrayed partner is innocent, the poor, faithful soul dragged through someone else's mess. But the truth is never that clean. And if I'm going to keep telling this story, I need to be honest about one thing. I've been lying too. Not just to Renee. To everyone. Especially myself. You see, the night before our wedding, 9 years ago, in a freezing Airbnb cabin outside Boulder, I slept with someone else. It wasn't a drunken mistake. It wasn't even impulsive. It was deliberate. Calculated. A final escape hatch before I signed my name to a lifetime contract I wasn't sure I could keep. Her name was Dana, a girl I used to know back in college. She came to the bachelor party as a surprise guest and stayed behind after everyone else crashed. One thing led to another, and yeah, that was the first brick in the wall I've been hiding behind ever since. I never told Renee. Not even when we had our complete honesty talks a few years into the marriage. Not even when we renewed our vows. I buried it deep, convinced that if I never did it again, it didn't count. But the truth is, I cheated before she did. I just did it early enough to pretend it wasn't a part of who I am. Until now. The 6th envelope wasn't a trap for her. It was a confession. A full written statement, dated and signed by me, detailing what I did, when I did it, who I did it with, and how I rationalized it. I included screenshots of old messages with Dana, hotel receipts, a photo of her from that night that I never deleted, tucked away in a forgotten drive, like some twisted souvenir. But I didn't send it to Renee. I sent it to her therapist. Yeah, I knew she was seeing someone. She didn't think I did, but I'd seen the appointment reminders pop up on her iPad calendar when she forgot to turn off syncing. Every Wednesday at 3:45 p.m. under the label Wellness Check. The therapist's name was Dr. Leslie Rowan. I found her office, found her email, and I sent the full confession in an untraceable envelope with a single note. She deserves to know the full truth. Not just hers. Mine too. Because here's what I realized. If I kept orchestrating her breakdown, I wasn't just punishing her. I was becoming the monster she'd turned me into in her mind. I needed her to feel what I'd felt, yes. But I also needed her to know she wasn't the only one who poisoned this marriage. I had done it too. The difference was, I just did it quietly, elegantly, while hiding behind pity. The next week, when she came home from her Wednesday wellness check, She looked different. Not destroyed. Not furious. Just stunned. Like the wind had been knocked out of her, but she wasn't sure who threw the punch. She didn't say a word during dinner. She barely looked at me. But I saw something new in her eyes. Not fear, not guilt. Recognition. And that was worse than anything. That night, she asked me a single question. Do you still love me, Glenn? And I wanted to say no. I wanted to say I never did, or that I couldn't anymore, or that whatever this was between us had already burned to ash. But I didn't say any of that. I said, I don't know. Because that was the truth. She nodded. No tears. No accusations. Just that quiet nod, like she already knew the answer, but needed to hear me say it out loud to make it real. We slept in separate rooms for the first time in our marriage that night, and I thought that would be the beginning of the end. But then, the next morning, the doorbell rang, and on our porch was a box. No return address. No markings. Inside, not an envelope. A phone. A burner. And when I turned it on, there was only one message waiting. You're not the only one watching her. For a few long seconds, I just stared at the screen. You're not the only one watching her. That sentence hung in the air like smoke. My first instinct was panic. Was this some kind of threat? Had someone else been tracking her? Us. Was there another player in this twisted little game I thought I'd been orchestrating alone? I checked the phone. No contacts, no apps. Just the message. No sender listed. Whoever sent it knew what they were doing. I expected dread to settle in. The old anxiety, the chest-tightening uncertainty that had defined the last few weeks of my life. But something strange happened instead. I laughed. Not loudly. Not bitterly. Just laughed. A quiet, exhausted, almost involuntary chuckle that bubbled up out of my throat like pressure finally escaping a cracked pipe. Because in that moment, I realized something. I didn't want to keep playing this game anymore. Not because I was scared, but because I was finally tired. Tired of pretending I was only reacting to her betrayal when I'd been carrying my own for years. Tired of weaponizing the truth. Tired of proving a point to someone who, deep down, had probably stopped being my partner long before either of us ever cheated. I left the phone on the porch and went back inside. Renee was in the kitchen, sitting at the table with a cup of tea, not coffee, the same chamomile blend she used to drink when we first moved in together. She looked up when I entered, and for the first time in a very, very long time, her face wasn't defensive. It wasn't ashamed. It was just open. I read your letter, she said quietly. I nodded. I know. She took a breath. I think maybe we broke each other a long time ago, and neither of us wanted to admit it. I sat across from her. No envelope this time. No lies. Just two people, surrounded by the ashes of a life they built and burned together. Do you hate me? She asked. I shook my head slowly. No, but I think we forgot how to love each other. Silence. Then, she reached across the table and laid her hand on mine. Not possessively. Not with expectation. Just gently. What do we do now? She asked. I didn't have a dramatic answer. I didn't want one. All I said was, we stop lying. Even if that means walking away. Or starting over. But whatever comes next, it has to be honest. She nodded. There were tears in her eyes, but they didn't fall. She didn't need them to. That afternoon, we went for a walk. Just around the block. No phones. No talking. Just the sound of gravel underfoot and the wind pushing through the trees like it had been waiting for us to finally shut up and listen. We didn't decide to get divorced that day. We didn't pretend everything was suddenly healed. But we did something better. We chose peace. Real peace. No more surveillance. No more secrets. No more revenge. We started therapy, together this time. Not as a desperate attempt to save something dead, but as two flawed people who wanted to understand how they'd lost each other, and maybe, how to find something worth saving again. I don't know what the future holds. But I know this. The war is over. And that might just be enough.